My name is Alice Walsh, and the moment I walked into the grand ballroom of the Riverside Country Club, I could feel the judgment radiating from every corner of the room like heat from a furnace. It wasn't just the way conversations paused when I passed, or how eyes darted away the second I made contact. It wasn't even the fact that my place card at table 12 read simply Alice Walsh, with no title, no achievement, no acknowledgement of the last 15 years of my life. No, what told me everything I needed to know was the slideshow projected on the massive screen behind the podium. Photo after photo of my cousins, my siblings, family friends, all beaming in their success. There was my brother Marcus in his surgeon scrubs, arms crossed confidently outside Seattle Presbyterian Hospital. My sister Elena cut a ribbon at the opening of her third boutique law firm in downtown Portland. Cousin Derek shaking hands with the mayor after his real estate development won a city planning award. But as I watched that endless rotation of achievements, scanning each face, each accomplishment, each carefully curated moment of family pride, I realized something that made my chest tighten with a familiar ache. I wasn't there. Not once. Not a single photo, not a single mention, not even an old graduation picture from when I'd earned my PhD in theoretical astrophysics from Caltech at 26. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I stood there in my simple black dress, the one I'd debated wearing for 3 hours because I knew it would be scrutinized, and watched my family celebrate with everyone except me. The woman beside me, probably someone's wife, glanced at my empty hands and asked with false sweetness, "So what do you do, dear?" Before I could answer, my Aunt Patricia materialized beside us, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for family embarrassments. "Oh, that's Alice. She's still figuring things out. You know how it is with some of these academic types. All theory, no practical application." The woman's smile turned pitying. "Oh, I see. Well, everyone finds their path eventually." I wanted to tell them both exactly what my path had been. I wanted to explain that for the past decade and a half, I'd been working on projects so classified they didn't have names, only numbers. That the equations I solved in windowless rooms beneath the Nevada desert had kept satellites operational and space missions on course. That the useless degree Patricia referred to had led to innovations in propulsion systems that would one day take humans to Mars. Instead, I just smiled and nodded, because that's what I'd been doing for years, staying quiet, letting them fill in the blanks with their assumptions. The evening had started 3 hours earlier when I'd driven up the winding road to the country club where my grandmother's 90th birthday celebration was being held. 4 generations of the Walsh and Morrison families, all gathering to honor the woman who'd raised half of us after various family tragedies. Grandma Rose deserved the celebration, which was the only reason I'd come. I'd parked between Marcus's Tesla and Elena's BMW, my 10-year-old Honda Civic looking exactly as out of place as I felt. Walking through those ornate doors, past the crystal chandeliers and oil paintings of long-dead club presidents, I tried to prepare myself for the usual questions, the familiar disappointment in people's eyes when I couldn't give them an answer they understood. "What do you do for work, Alice?" "I work in aerospace engineering." "Oh, like building airplanes?" "Something like that." It was easier than explaining that I designed navigation systems for deep space exploration, that my algorithms were currently guiding 3 different Mars rovers, that my doctoral thesis on gravitational wave detection had been cited in papers that led to Nobel Prize-winning discoveries. Easier than watching their eyes glaze over or seeing them change the subject to something more relatable. So I'd learned to be vague, to deflect, to let them assume I was underemployed or struggling to find my place in the world. It hurt less than trying to bridge a gap they didn't want to cross. The cocktail hour had been a masterclass in subtle exclusion, conversations that stopped when I approached, introductions where my accomplishments were mysteriously omitted while everyone else's were highlighted. My Uncle Frank had introduced his son Jeremy as the one who just made partner at his accounting firm, then gestured to me with, "And this is Alice. Alice is here too."
When dinner was announced, I found my assigned seat at a table with the teenage cousins and elderly relatives who needed assistance cutting their food. The message was clear. I belonged with those who either hadn't achieved anything yet or were past the point of achievement mattering. As the evening progressed, the speeches began. One by one, family members stood to toast Grandma Rose and share memories. But what emerged wasn't just a celebration of her life, it was a recitation of family success stories, each speaker taking the opportunity to highlight their own accomplishments or those of their children. Rose always believed in the value of practical success, my father announced during his speech, his voice carrying across the room with that authority he'd cultivated during his 40 years as a bank president. She understood that real achievement comes from building something tangible, something that contributes to society in measurable ways. She's so proud of Marcus saving lives every day, of Elena fighting for justice in our courts, of all her grandchildren who found meaningful careers that make a difference. His eyes swept the room, pausing on each of his successful children and grandchildren before sliding past me entirely. Not with malice, but with something worse. With the practiced blindness of someone who'd trained himself not to see what didn't fit his narrative. The applause was warm, appreciative. Heads nodded in agreement about the value of practical success and meaningful careers. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, wondering if they'd ever considered that keeping humanity's presence in space might qualify of making a difference. After dinner, as people mingled and the bar reopened, I overheard a conversation that crystallized everything I'd been feeling. My mother was talking to her sister Janet, their voices low, but not quite low enough. "It's such a shame about Alice," Mom was saying, swirling her wine glass absently. "All that education, all that potential, and what does she have to show for it? She's 38 years old, Janet. 38, with no husband, no children, working some government job that she can't even explain properly." "I heard she's still living in that tiny apartment in Pasadena," Janet replied. "Remember when we thought she'd be the success story of the family? Valedictorian, full scholarship, PhD by 26. We were so sure she'd be the one to really make something of herself." Instead, she wasted all that intelligence on some theoretical nonsense that doesn't even exist in the real world. Meanwhile, Marcus is saving lives, and Elena is building a law empire. Sometimes I wonder where we went wrong with Alice. I stood frozen behind a marble pillar, my champagne glass growing warm in my grip. This wasn't news to me. I'd sensed their disappointment for years. But hearing it articulated so clearly, so matter-of-factly, hit differently than I'd expected. They weren't angry with me. They weren't even really disappointed anymore. They'd simply written me off, filed me under failed potential, and moved on to celebrating the children who'd met their expectations. The worst part was that I understood their perspective. From the outside, my life probably did look like a series of questionable choices. The advanced degree in a field most people couldn't pronounce, the job I couldn't discuss in detail, the apartment I'd never upgraded because I spent most of my time either traveling to classified facilities or buried so deep in work that I barely noticed my surroundings.
I'd never brought a boyfriend to family events because the few relationships I'd had couldn't survive the security clearances and the unexplained absences and the late-night phone calls about satellite malfunctions or trajectory corrections. I'd never bought a house because I never knew when I might be called to relocate for a project. I'd never had children because my work required a level of focus and availability that didn't leave room for the kind of parenting I'd want to provide. From their perspective, I was the cautionary tale, the one who'd chosen abstract academic pursuits over practical success, who'd prioritized theoretical achievements over real-world impact. They couldn't see the satellites I'd helped launch, the missions I'd guided to successful completion, the problems I'd solved that allowed other people's achievements to even be possible. To them, I was just Alice, the one with the useless degree and the inexplicable career, still trying to figure out her life while everyone else had already figured out theirs. As the evening wound down and people began saying their goodbyes to Grandma Rose, I approached her wheelchair where she sat surrounded by flowers and cards and photos from the celebration. At 90, her mind was still sharp, her eyes still bright with the intelligence that had helped her raise 6 children as a single mother during the Depression.
Alice, sweetheart, she said, reaching for my hand with fingers that were wrinkled but steady. I'm so glad you came tonight. I wouldn't have missed it, Grandma. She studied my face with the kind of attention she'd always given me, even as a child. You look tired, honey. Are you working too hard at that job of yours? I almost laughed. If only she knew. Sometimes, but it's important work. I'm sure it is, she said, and for a moment I thought she might be the one person who understood. You know, I've always been proud of you, Alice. You went your own way, followed your own path. That takes courage. Mom doesn't see it that way, I said before I could stop myself. Grandma Rose's expression grew thoughtful. Your mother sees success in terms she can understand. Big houses, prestigious titles, traditional milestones. She means well, but she's never been good at recognizing different kinds of achievement. What if she's right, though? What if I really did waste my potential on something that doesn't matter? Oh, sweetheart, Grandma Rose said, squeezing my hand. Just because people can't see the value in what you do doesn't mean it doesn't have value. Some of the most important work in the world happens in quiet corners, away from applause and recognition. The people who do that work don't do it for praise. They do it because it needs to be done. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Her words stayed with me as I drove home through the winding canyon roads, past houses where other families were probably gathering around dinner tables, sharing stories about their days in jobs that could be easily explained and quickly understood. I thought about the conversation I'd overheard, about the disappointment in my mother's voice, about the careful way my family had learned to navigate around the topic of my career. But I also thought about the project I'd returned to on Monday morning, the one that had consumed my thoughts for the past 18 months. The calculations that were finally coming together, the simulations that were yielding results that even I had barely dared to hope for. The work that could change everything if it succeeded. For 15 years, I'd let them define success on their terms. I'd accepted their disappointment and their gentle dismissal, had learned to make myself smaller at family gatherings, to deflect questions and downplay achievements they wouldn't understand anyway. But as I pulled into my driveway and sat in the darkness of my car, staring at the small apartment that had been my haven through years of groundbreaking work, I realized something had shifted. Maybe it was Grandma Rose's words, or maybe it was finally hearing my mother's disappointment spoken aloud. But I was tired of being the family failure. I was tired of apologizing for a life that didn't fit their expectations, tired of letting them reduce 15 years of extraordinary achievements to a cautionary tale about impractical education and poor life choices. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow, I would return to the work that actually mattered, the work that would determine whether humanity's next great leap into the cosmos succeeded or failed. And for the first time in years, I wasn't going to apologize for that anymore. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually energized me for the work ahead. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena was already buzzing with activity when I arrived at 6 a.m., 2 hours before most of my colleagues. I preferred these quiet morning hours when the corridors were empty and I could think without interruption. My badge beeped as I swiped into Building 264, the nondescript concrete structure that housed some of NASA's most ambitious projects. To anyone driving past, it looked like another industrial building. Inside, it contained technology that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade ago. I made my way to Lab 7, where the Artemis Deep Space Navigation prototype waited under protective covering. For 18 months, this had been my world, a room filled with quantum computers, holographic displays, and equipment worth more than most people's houses. The project was so classified that even within NASA, only 12 people knew its full scope. As I pulled up the overnight diagnostic reports on my workstation, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Elena. "Great seeing you last night. Mom wants to know if you're free for lunch this week. She has some job leads for you." I stared at the message, feeling that familiar mix of frustration and resignation. Job leads. as if my current position was something I'd stumbled into while waiting for real employment to come along. I was about to delete the message when Dr. James Rodriguez, my project partner, and one of the few people who understood the magnitude of what we were building, appeared beside my desk with 2 cups of coffee and a grim expression. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Congress is asking questions." I looked up from my phone, immediately focused. What kind of questions? The kind that comes with budget reviews and program evaluations. Senator Williams from the Science Committee wants a full briefing on all classified aerospace projects by Friday, including ours. My stomach dropped. Senator Rebecca Williams was known for her skepticism about what she called blue sky spending, government funding for research projects without immediate practical applications. She'd already killed 3 NASA programs in the past year, redirecting their budgets to what she termed earthbound priorities. "How much does she know?" I asked. "Officially, just that we're working on advanced navigation systems. Unofficially," James shrugged. "Someone's been feeding her information. She specifically mentioned concerns about theoretical research with no demonstrable returns on taxpayer investment." The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Theoretical research with no demonstrable returns? It was exactly what my family had been saying about my career for years, now echoed in the halls of Congress by someone with the power to end 15 years of work with a signature. Who would leak information about a classified project? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "That's what I've been trying to figure out," James said, pulling up a secure folder on his tablet. "I've been going through the access logs, looking at who's had contact with the program documentation. The list is small, but there's something you need to see." He handed me the tablet, and I scrolled through the records of everyone who'd accessed our project files in the past 6 months. Most of the names were familiar: team members, supervisors, Pentagon liaisons, but one entry made my blood freeze.
Dr. Marcus Walsh, Medical Consultant, Astronaut Health Assessment Division. My brother Marcus had accessed our files 3 weeks ago. According to the log, he'd been reviewing medical protocols for long-duration space missions, which would have given him access to mission parameters, timeline projections, and budget allocations. "Your brother's on the astronaut medical team," James said quietly. "He would have needed clearance to review physical requirements for crew members on deep space missions." "But he wouldn't have needed details about the navigation systems," I said, my mind racing. "These access logs show he pulled files on propulsion calculations, trajectory modeling, budget breakdowns. None of that relates to medical protocols." James nodded grimly. "And look at the timestamp. He accessed those files the day after your grandmother's birthday party." The implications hit me all at once. Marcus had used his medical clearance to dig into my actual work, to find out what his mysterious sister really did all day in her government job that she could never explain properly. And what he'd found had somehow made its way to a senator who was now questioning the value of the entire program. "There's more," James said, taking back the tablet and scrolling to another screen. "I called a friend at the Senate Science Committee. Turns out Senator Williams received a detailed letter last week from a concerned citizen highlighting wasteful spending on impractical space research. The letter specifically mentioned our project and questioned whether taxpayer money should fund theoretical work with no clear applications." "Do we know who sent it?" "Officially, no. The letter was anonymous. But my friend mentioned something interesting. The person who wrote it seemed to have inside knowledge about aerospace engineering and current NASA projects. They used technical language correctly, but framed everything in terms of practical applications and fiscal responsibility." I felt sick. Marcus had always been good with words, persuasive and articulate. During medical school, he'd written opinion pieces for the university newspaper about healthcare policy. He knew how to present technical information in ways that lay people could understand, and apparently how to frame scientific research to make it sound wasteful and impractical. "Why would he do this?" I asked, though even as I said it, I remembered the conversations from the night before. The emphasis on practical success, on tangible contributions to society, on work that made a measurable difference.
Maybe he thought he was helping, James suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Maybe he thought exposing what he saw as wasteful spending would force you to find more practical work. I thought about my mother's words. Sometimes I wonder where we went wrong with Alice. I thought about my father's speech about practical success and meaningful careers. I thought about 15 years of being treated like the family disappointment, the one who'd wasted her potential on theoretical nonsense. Marcus hadn't just stumbled across information about my work. He'd gone looking for it, used his medical clearance to dig into classified files, and then weaponized what he found to try to end my career. All while maintaining his image as the responsible, successful son who saves lives and makes practical contributions to society. "What's our timeline?" I asked, pushing down the rage that was building in my chest. "Senator Williams wants the briefing by Friday. If we can't demonstrate immediate, practical applications for the Artemis system, she's recommending the program be terminated and the budget reallocated to existing missions." Friday was 4 days away. 4 days to prove that 15 years of work had value, that the breakthrough we were on the verge of achieving would justify every dollar spent and every hour invested. "What do we have that's demonstratable?" I asked. James's expression grew more serious. "That's the thing, Alice. We're closer than we've ever been, but we're not quite there yet. The quantum navigation matrix is functional, but we haven't had a chance to test it on an actual mission. The propulsion calculations are solid, but they're still theoretical. Everything we've built is exactly what it needs to be for the next phase of human space exploration. But proving that requires a demonstration we're not authorized to make." I stared at the covered prototype across the room, thinking about the breakthrough that was so close I could practically touch it. The navigation system that would allow spacecraft to plot courses to distant galaxies with precision that had never been possible before. The propulsion theories that could cut travel time to Mars from 9 months to 6 weeks. The work that would make humanity a truly spacefaring species. All of it was about to be labeled as wasteful spending and shut down because my brother had decided my career wasn't practical enough. "There might be another way," I said slowly, an idea beginning to form. "What if we could get authorization for a demonstration? Something public enough to show Senator Williams exactly what this technology can do." "You'd need approval from the director level, minimum, probably higher. And you'd need a mission that's already approved for public demonstration." I was quiet for a moment, thinking about the various NASA projects that were scheduled for public events in the coming week. Then I remembered something that made my pulse quicken. The Mars rover Perseverance has been having navigation issues, right? Communication delays, course corrections that aren't holding? Yeah, but that's not unusual for Mars missions. The distance creates natural delays and solar interference effects. "What if it wasn't natural?" I interrupted. "What if we could demonstrate that our navigation system could solve those problems in real time? Show Senator Williams that this theoretical research could save missions that are already in progress." James stared at me. "You're talking about patching an experimental system into an active Mars mission. That would require approval from Dr. Sarah Chen, mission director for Mars operations, and she's been looking for solutions to the Perseverance's navigation issues for months." "It's risky, Alice. If something goes wrong, if our system interferes with Perseverance's operations, we won't just lose funding, we could lose our careers." I thought about Marcus, probably at the hospital right now, saving lives and basking in the admiration of colleagues who understood and valued his work. I thought about Elena, building her legal empire one case at a time, earning respect and recognition that fit neatly into dinner party conversations. I thought about my family, who saw my life as a cautionary tale about the dangers of impractical education and theoretical pursuits, who had no idea that the work they dismissed so casually was on the verge of revolutionizing human space exploration. "James," I said, my voice steady with a resolve I hadn't felt in years. "For 15 years, I've let people think my work doesn't matter because I couldn't tell them what it really does. I've accepted their disappointment and their dismissal because the work itself was supposed to be enough." I stood up and walked over to the prototype, pulling back the protective covering to reveal the sleek, impossibly complex device that represented the culmination of everything I'd learned and achieved. But if we let Senator Williams kill this program because we can't demonstrate its value, then maybe they're right. Maybe theoretical research without practical application really is worthless. I turned back to James, who was watching me with growing understanding. But if we can show them what this technology can actually do, if we can prove that this useless degree and all those years of theoretical work can solve real problems and push humanity further into space than we've ever gone before, then your brother's letter becomes the thing that forces us to prove our worth, James finished, and Senator Williams becomes the audience for our vindication. Exactly. I smiled for the first time since seeing Marcus's name in the access logs. Let's go talk to Dr. Chen. As we gathered the files and data we'd need for the presentation, I felt something shifting inside me. For years, I'd been content to work in the shadows, to let my achievements speak quietly to the small circle of people who understood their significance. I'd accepted my family's narrative about my life because fighting it seemed harder than ignoring it. But Marcus had crossed a line. He'd taken his disappointment in my choices and turned it into a weapon designed to destroy everything I'd built. He'd used his access and his influence to try to prove that his practical, understandable success was more valuable than my theoretical, invisible achievements. What he didn't realize was that he'd also given me something I'd never had before, a deadline and an audience. In 4 days, I would stand in front of Senator Williams and demonstrate exactly what 15 years of useless theoretical research could accomplish. And if we succeeded, if the Artemis system performed the way I knew it could, then every family gathering for the rest of my life would have a very different dynamic. Marcus thought he was protecting taxpayers from wasteful spending on impractical research. Instead, he was about to find out just how practical his little sister's work really was. Dr. Sarah Chen's office occupied the top floor of Building 230, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the San Gabriel Mountains. When James and I arrived at her door Tuesday morning, we found her standing at those windows, coffee cup in hand, staring at something only she could see. "The Mars team is pulling another all-nighter," she said without turning around. "Perseverance missed its 3rd trajectory correction this week. We're burning through backup fuel just trying to keep it on course." Sarah had been Mars mission director for 7 years, overseeing everything from rover operations to orbital mechanics. She was brilliant, demanding, and had a reputation for making decisions that other administrators wouldn't dare attempt. If anyone would authorize what we were proposing, it would be her. "Dr. Chen," I began, "we think we might have a solution." She turned then, her sharp eyes moving between James and me. "I'm listening." For the next hour, we laid out everything: the Artemis Deep Space Navigation System, its quantum-based trajectory calculations, the real-time course correction capabilities that could eliminate the communication delays plaguing Mars missions. We showed her the simulations, the test data, the theoretical frameworks that proved our system could solve the exact problems she'd been wrestling with. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally asking technical questions that demonstrated she understood exactly what we were proposing. When we finished, she was quiet for a long moment, studying the data on her tablet. "This is impressive work," she said finally. "Revolutionary, actually. But you're asking me to patch an experimental system into an active mission that's already struggling. If something goes wrong..." "We lose Perseverance," James finished. "We know." "No," Sarah said, her voice hard. "If something goes wrong, we lose more than one rover. We lose congressional confidence in NASA's ability to manage missions responsibly. We lose funding for the entire Mars program. We lose public support for space exploration at a time when we can't afford to lose anything." I understood her hesitation. Sarah's career had been built on careful risk assessment, on making decisions that balanced innovation with responsibility. What we were proposing was anything but careful. "There's something else you need to know," I said, and told her about Senator Williams, about the anonymous letter, about the Friday deadline that would determine whether our program survived or died. Sarah's expression grew thoughtful as I explained how Marcus had accessed our files and weaponized our research against us. When I finished, she set down her tablet and walked back to the windows. "So you're not just asking me to risk an active mission to test your technology," she said. "You're asking me to stake my reputation on a public demonstration that will either validate 15 years of your work or spectacularly prove your critics right." "That's exactly what we're asking," I said. Sarah laughed, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Alice, I've known you for 8 years. I've watched you solve problems that stumped teams of engineers. I've seen your work save missions and push boundaries that seemed impossible to cross. But this—" She gestured at the data we'd spread across her conference table. "This isn't just about proving your technology works. This is about proving that the kind of long-term theoretical research you do has value in a world that wants immediate results and measurable returns." "Yes," I said.
And if we fail, if perseverance is damaged or lost because of our intervention, you're not just losing your program, you're validating every criticism that's ever been made about impractical research and wasteful spending. Also, yes. Sarah studied my face for a moment. What changed? 8 years ago, you would never have proposed something this risky. You've always been methodical, careful, content to let your work speak for itself. Why now? I thought about how to answer that. About Marcus's betrayal, about my family's disappointment, about 15 years of being treated like a cautionary tale about the dangers of following the wrong path. But what came out was simpler and more honest than I'd expected. "Because I'm tired of being invisible," I said. "I'm tired of doing work that matters and having no one understand why it matters. I'm tired of letting other people define the value of what I do based on their ability to comprehend it." Sarah nodded slowly. "And you think a public demonstration will change that?" "I think a successful public demonstration will make it impossible to ignore," I corrected. "Senator Williams can dismiss theoretical research as wasteful spending, but she can't dismiss a system that saves a Mars mission in real time." "And if it's not successful?" I met her gaze steadily. "Then Marcus wins. Then everyone who ever said I wasted my potential on useless degrees and impractical research gets to be right. And humanity stays earthbound a little longer, while we argue about whether the future is worth investing in." Sarah was quiet again, and I could see her running calculations in her head. Not technical ones, but the complex mathematics of risk and reward that governed every major decision in space exploration. "There's a window," she said finally. "Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m. Pacific. Perseverance will be attempting its next major course correction to align with the sample retrieval mission parameters. If we're going to test your system, that's when we'll do it." James leaned forward. "That's cutting it close to the Friday deadline." "That's the point," Sarah replied. "If your system works, we'll have real-time data to present to Senator Williams. If it doesn't work, we'll have 24 hours to prepare damage control." She walked to her desk and pulled out a secure tablet, her fingers flying across the screen as she accessed mission control schedules and authorization protocols. "I'll need a sign-off from Houston, approval from the Mars Program Oversight Committee, and clearance from the director level for experimental technology integration," she continued. "That's a lot of bureaucracy to navigate in 48 hours. What can we do to help?" I asked. Sarah looked up from her tablet with something that might have been a smile. "Pray that your system is as good as you think it is. Because if we get authorization for this demonstration and it fails, it won't just be your career that's over." The next 36 hours blurred together in a haze of technical preparations, security clearances, and bureaucratic maneuvering that made rocket science seem simple by comparison. Sarah had been right about the complexity of getting approval for what we were proposing. Every level of NASA administration had to sign off on patching experimental technology into an active Mars mission. But something interesting happened as word of our proposed demonstrations spread through the agency's upper levels. Instead of the resistance I expected, we encountered curiosity, even excitement. The Mars program had been struggling with navigation issues for months, and everyone from mission controllers to administrators was eager to see if our technology could solve problems that conventional systems couldn't handle.
By Wednesday evening, we had the approvals we needed. More importantly, we had something I hadn't expected: an audience. Word about the demonstration had reached other departments, other agencies. The Pentagon was sending observers. The National Science Foundation wanted representatives present. Even the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy had requested access to the real-time data feed. What had started as a desperate attempt to save our program had become something much larger: a test case for the value of long-term theoretical research in an era of immediate practical demands. "No pressure," James muttered as we ran final diagnostics on the Artemis system Wednesday night. The lab was quiet, except for the hum of quantum processors and the occasional beep of status indicators. "I've been thinking about that," I said, adjusting the calibration parameters for the 100th time. "About pressure, I mean. And for 15 years, I felt pressure to justify my work, to make it understandable and acceptable to people who couldn't see its value. I've spent so much energy trying to minimize what I do that I forgot how to celebrate what I've accomplished." I stepped back from the main console, where lines of code scrolled past in patterns that would have looked like random symbols to most people, but represented years of breakthrough discoveries to me. "Tomorrow isn't about pressure," I continued. "It's about finally showing the world what this useless degree can actually accomplish." James smiled. "And if Senator Williams still doesn't see the value, then at least we'll know we gave everything we had to prove it existed." Thursday morning arrived gray and overcast, with marine layer clouds hanging low over the San Gabriel Valley. I arrived at the lab at 5 a.m. to find that I wasn't alone. James was already there, along with Dr. Chen and 2 technicians from the Mars mission team. "Couldn't sleep either?" Sarah asked, not looking up from the diagnostic screen she was reviewing. "Too much adrenaline," I admitted. "How are we looking?" "All systems are green. Houston has confirmed Perseverance is on schedule for the course correction attempt. The Oversight Committee is standing by, and Senator Williams' staff has confirmed she'll be watching the live feed from Washington." I nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in my stomach. In 8 hours, 15 years of work would either be validated in the most public way possible or destroyed just as publicly. "There's something else," Sarah said, handing me her tablet. "I thought you should see this before we begin." On the screen was an email from Dr. Michael Torres, NASA's administrator. The subject line read, "Personal note re today's demonstration." I opened it and read, "Dr. Walsh, I want you to know that regardless of today's outcome, your work represents the kind of long-term thinking that has always driven humanity's greatest achievements. Win or lose, you've reminded us why we explore the unknown. Good luck today." I stared at the message, feeling something shift inside my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting just to prove I belonged. I was fighting for something much larger, for the idea that some achievements couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or election cycles, that some work mattered precisely because its value couldn't be immediately quantified. "Ready?" Sarah asked. I looked around the lab at the technology we'd built, at the team that had believed in this impossible project, at the screens that would soon show the world whether theoretical research could solve real problems in real time. "More than ready," I said. At 11:30 a.m., 3 hours before the scheduled demonstration, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's name, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Alice?" His voice carried that particular tone he used when he was trying to sound concerned rather than condescending. "I heard through some colleagues that you're involved in some kind of public demonstration today at NASA." "Word travels fast," I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. "Look, I know we don't always see eye to eye about your career choices, but I'm worried about you. People are saying this is some kind of high-risk test of experimental technology. What if something goes wrong?" The audacity of it took my breath away. Marcus, who had sabotaged my program, was now calling to express concern about the demonstration he'd forced us into. "Marcus," I said slowly, "I know what you did." Silence stretched between us for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was different, sharper, more defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The access logs, the anonymous letter to Senator Williams, using your medical clearance to dig into classified files about my work." Each word came out precise and controlled. I know exactly what you did. Another pause. Then Marcus sighed, and when he spoke again, the pretense was gone. Alice, I was trying to help you. Do you have any idea how much taxpayer money is being wasted on projects like yours? Research that leads nowhere, theoretical work that never produces anything tangible? You don't know what my work produces because it's classified. That's exactly the problem, his voice rose, and I could hear the frustration he'd been holding back for years. You disappear into some government lab, you can't tell anyone what you do, you live in a tiny apartment and drive a 10-year-old car, and for what? So you can feel important working on projects that nobody understands? I walked away from the lab's main area, finding a quiet corner where this conversation wouldn't disturb the final preparations. You want to know what I do, Marcus? What have I been doing for the past 15 years while you've been saving lives and earning everyone's admiration? Go ahead, enlighten me. I design navigation systems for spacecraft traveling to other planets. I solve trajectory problems that allow rovers to land precisely on Mars. I create algorithms that keep satellites operational and communication networks functioning. I work on technology that will eventually take humans to other star systems. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't pleasant. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Star systems, Alice. We can barely handle problems here on Earth, and you're worried about traveling to other planets. While you were in medical school learning to repair hearts, I was learning to repair the future. While you were building a practice, I was building the foundation for humanity's expansion into space. While you were earning applause for saving individual lives, I was working to save our entire species. From what? What exactly are you saving us from? The question hung in the air, and I realized that this was the heart of everything, not just Marcus's betrayal, but my family's fundamental inability to understand why my work mattered. Climate change will eventually make Earth uninhabitable, I said. Asteroid impacts, solar flares, gamma-ray bursts, any number of cosmic events could end human civilization. The only long-term survival strategy for our species is to become spacefaring, to establish colonies on other worlds, to spread beyond this single planet. That's science fiction, Alice. 50 years ago, landing on the moon was science fiction. 100 years ago, flight was science fiction. Everything that seems impossible today becomes routine tomorrow, but only if people like me spend years working on the theoretical foundations that make it possible. I could hear Marcus breathing on the other end of the line, and I pressed on. You see my work as wasteful because you can't see past the immediate results. You save a patient, and they walk out of the hospital the same day. I solve a navigation problem, and 30 years later, a spacecraft reaches another galaxy because of calculations I did in a windowless room. But what about your life, Alice? What about marriage, children, a house, a real career that people can understand and respect? What about them?
Don't you want any of those things? I thought about that question and really considered it for the first time in years. Did I want the traditional markers of success that my family valued so highly? The suburban house, the impressive job title, the dinner party conversations where I could easily explain what I did for a living. I want to matter, I said finally. I want my life to contribute something meaningful to the world. And if that means living differently than you think I should, if it means choosing work that can't be easily explained at cocktail parties, then that's a choice I'm comfortable making. But you're 40 years old, Alice. When are you going to grow up and start living in the real world? The condescension in his voice triggered something I hadn't expected. Not anger, but clarity. For years, I'd accepted Marcus's version of maturity, his definition of the real world, his assessment of what constituted a successful life. The real world, I repeated. Marcus, I've griefed presidents about threats you can't imagine. I've solved problems that affect millions of people. I've pushed the boundaries of human knowledge and capability in ways that will echo through centuries. If that's not the real world, then what is? It's theoretical, Alice. It's all theoretical. So was heart surgery once. So was every medical procedure you use to save lives. Someone had to do the theoretical work. The research that seemed impractical and wasteful at the time,
before doctors like you could apply it practically. I heard voices in the background on his end of the call, probably hospital staff needing him for actual medical emergencies. I have to go, he said. But Alice, please be careful today. Whatever you're planning, whatever point you think you're proving, just remember that if something goes wrong, it's not just your career that suffers. It's the reputation of everyone who's supported you, everyone who's believed in this work. After he hung up, I stood in the quiet corner of the lab, processing the conversation. Marcus had called to express concern, but underneath that concern was the same fundamental disrespect that had always characterized our relationship. He still saw my work as theoretical nonsense, my choices as immature rebellion against practical reality. But something had shifted during our conversation. For the first time, I'd articulated clearly why my work mattered, not just to me, but to humanity's future. I'd stopped apologizing for my choices and started defending them with the passion they deserved. When I returned to the main lab area, I found an unexpected scene. Dr. Chen was standing beside my workstation, tablet in hand, but she wasn't alone. Director Michael Torres was there, along with two people I didn't recognize wearing suits that suggested government positions above NASA's pay grade. Alice, Dr. Chen said as I approached, I'd like you to meet Deputy Director Patricia Blackwood from the National Reconnaissance Office and Dr. Kevin Park from the Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. I shook hands with both visitors, trying to hide my surprise. The National Reconnaissance Office managed the country's spy satellites. DARPA developed breakthrough technologies for national defense. These weren't just observers, they were evaluators with the authority to fund or kill programs at levels far above Senator Williams's influence. Dr. Walsh, Deputy Director Blackwood said, "We've been reviewing your work with great interest. The applications for national security are significant. If today's demonstration succeeds," Dr. Park added, "we'd like to discuss expanding your research into areas that go far beyond Mars navigation." I felt my pulse quicken. What kind of areas? The kind that makes theoretical research suddenly very practical, Dr. Chen said, with something that looked like a smile. It seems your brother's letter to Senator Williams got more attention than he bargained for. How so? Director Torres spoke up for the first time. When Senator Williams began asking questions about your program, her staff reached out to other agencies for evaluation. They wanted expert opinions on whether your research had any practical applications. The initial assessment, Deputy Director Blackwood continued, indicated that your navigation technology could revolutionize satellite positioning, autonomous vehicle guidance, and deep space reconnaissance. Suddenly, your wasteful spending looked like the foundation for the next generation of national defense capabilities. I stared at them, processing the implications. Marcus's attempt to expose my work as impractical had instead revealed its strategic value to agencies with budgets that made NASA's funding look modest. The demonstration today isn't just about saving your current program, Dr. Park explained. It's about proving that this technology is ready for applications that could reshape how we approach space-based national security. No pressure, I said, echoing James's words from the night before. Actually, Director Torres said, quite a lot of pressure, but also quite a lot of support. If your system performs as expected, you'll have resources available that you've never dreamed of. I looked around the lab at the technology we'd built with minimal funding and maximum determination. The idea that it might become the foundation for a program with unlimited resources was both thrilling and terrifying. What happens if it doesn't work? I asked. Then we know it wasn't ready, Deputy Director Blackwood said simply. But based on everything we've seen in your research, failure isn't the outcome we're expecting. As our visitors departed to observe the demonstration from a secure viewing area, I felt the weight of expectation settling on my shoulders. What had started as a desperate attempt to save a research program had become an audition for participation in projects that could define the future of American space capability. But underneath the pressure was something else: vindication. The theoretical work that my family had dismissed as impractical was about to be evaluated by people who understood exactly how practical it could become. Marcus had wanted to prove that my research was wasteful. Instead, he'd forced me to prove that it was invaluable. At exactly 2 p.m. Pacific Time, the main screen in Mission Control displayed a map of Mars with Perseverance's current location marked by a blinking red dot. The rover was 47 million miles away, traveling at 15,000 miles per hour across the Martian surface, and it was off course.
I stood at the primary console, my hands steady on the Artemis system interface, watching as data streams flowed across multiple monitors. Behind me, the viewing gallery was packed with NASA administrators, government officials, and a live video feed connecting us to Senator Williams's office in Washington, D.C. Perseverance navigation status, Dr. Chen called from the mission director's station. Trajectory deviation confirmed at 2.3 kilometers from optimal path, came the response from the Mars team leader. Conventional correction algorithms indicate fuel requirements exceed safe parameters for mission completion. This was the moment we'd been building toward. Perseverance was far enough off course that traditional navigation methods would either fail to correct the problem or use so much fuel that the mission would have to be terminated early. Our system represented the rover's best chance of completing its sample collection objectives. Dr. Walsh, Dr. Chen said formally, her voice carrying across the room, "You are authorized to initiate Artemis Deep Space Navigation Interface with Perseverance rover systems." I pressed my palm to the biometric scanner, and the Artemis console came alive with holographic displays that showed the quantum calculations running in real time. The system began analyzing Perseverance's position, velocity, and trajectory using algorithms that processed gravitational data from 13 different celestial bodies simultaneously. "Artemis online," I announced, "Quantum Navigation Matrix active, beginning trajectory analysis." On the main screen, a new line appeared beside Perseverance's current path, a graceful arc that showed the optimal course correction calculated by our system. Unlike the conventional approach, which would require multiple burns over several days, Artemis had identified a single, precise maneuver that would put the rover back on track. "Trajectory solution computed," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "Single burn duration, 47 seconds. Fuel requirement, 12% below conventional estimates." Murmurs rippled through the viewing gallery. The conventional navigation team had estimated that course correction would require at least 20% of remaining fuel. Our system was promising the same result for significantly less. "Confirm trajectory calculations with backup systems," Dr. Chen ordered. For the next 10 minutes, 3 separate teams ran verification protocols, checking our results against established navigation models. The numbers held. In fact, the more they analyzed our solution, the more efficient it appeared. "All systems confirm Artemis trajectory calculations," the backup team leader announced. "Recommend immediate implementation." I looked up at the viewing gallery, where Deputy Director Blackwood and Dr. Park were watching intently. In the corner, a large monitor showed Senator Williams in her Washington office, surrounded by staff members and what appeared to be congressional budget analysts. "Perseverance, this is Mission Control," Dr. Chen spoke into her headset. "You are cleared for Artemis-guided course correction, initiating burn sequence in 30 seconds. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of computers and the steady rhythm of status updates from various monitoring stations. On the main screen, numbers counted down. 15 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds. "Burn initiated," came the voice from the Mars team. For 47 seconds that felt like 47 minutes, we watched as Perseverance's thrusters fired in the precise pattern calculated by the Artemis system. Real-time telemetry showed the rover's trajectory shifting degree by degree toward the optimal path our algorithms had identified. "Burn complete," the Mars team announced. "Telemetry indicates successful trajectory modification." But this was only the first part of the test. The real validation would come when we could verify that Perseverance had achieved the precise positioning our system had promised. "Dr. Walsh," Dr. Chen said, "please provide estimated time to trajectory confirmation." I checked the quantum processing displays, where complex calculations were still running to refine our predictions based on the actual burn data. This was what made Artemis revolutionary, its ability to learn and adapt in real time rather than relying on pre-calculated trajectories.
Dr. Walsh, a voice called from the back of the room. I turned to see a young technician holding a secure tablet. You have an urgent message. The tablet displayed a text from my mother. Alice, we're watching the NASA live stream. Marcus told us what you're doing. We had no idea. Call us after. I stared at the message, realizing that my family was among the thousands of people watching this demonstration online. Somewhere in their living room, my parents were seeing their daughter, the one they dismissed as a dreamer pursuing impractical education, attempt to solve a problem that conventional science couldn't handle. Dr. Walsh, Dr. Chen's voice brought me back to the moment. We're at 12 minutes. Preliminary validation? I checked the displays where new data was streaming in from Perseverance's updated position reports. Preliminary data confirms trajectory modification within acceptable parameters, I announced. Rover position variance from predicted location less than 50 meters.
50 meters. Across 47 million miles of space, our system had guided a course correction that landed within 50 meters of its target. The conventional navigation estimate had been accurate to within 2 kilometers. Outstanding, Dr. Chen said, and I could hear the excitement she was trying to keep out of her voice. At exactly 18 minutes post-burn, the final confirmation data arrived. Artemis trajectory confirmation complete, I said, reading from the main display. Perseverance is an optimal course for sample collection site Alpha 7. The mission timeline remains nominal. Fuel savings 14% compared to conventional correction methods. The viewing gallery erupted, not polite applause, but genuine excitement from people who understood exactly what they'd just witnessed. Dr. Torres was shaking hands with Deputy Director Blackwood. Dr. Park was already speaking rapidly into a secure phone. Even the normally reserved mission controllers were smiling and congratulating each other. But my attention was focused on the monitor showing Senator Williams' office. She was leaning forward in her chair, speaking intently with her staff. Whatever conversation they were having, it looked serious and focused. Dr. Walsh, Dr. Chen called over the noise, Senator Williams would like to speak with you directly. A technician quickly set up a secure video connection, and within moments, Senator Williams' face appeared on a dedicated monitor beside my workstation. Dr. Walsh, she said without preamble, I owe you an apology. When I received the letter questioning your program's value, I accepted the assessment that theoretical research without immediate applications represented poor use of taxpayer funds. I waited, unsure how to respond. What I just witnessed, she continued, was a demonstration of technology that could revolutionize not just space exploration, but satellite navigation, GPS accuracy, autonomous vehicle guidance, and countless other applications. This wasn't theoretical research. This was foundational work for technologies we're going to need in the next decade. Thank you, Senator, I managed. I'm recommending immediate expansion of your program's funding, she said, and I'll be speaking with the Defense Department about expediting practical applications of your navigation technology. Dr. Walsh, you've reminded me why we invest in long-term research, even when its value isn't immediately apparent. After the connection ended, I stood at my console, watching as the Artemis system continued to monitor Perseverance's progress across the Martian surface. The rover was exactly where it needed to be, following a path that would have been impossible without 15 years of theoretical work that most people couldn't understand or appreciate. James appeared beside me, grinning broadly. So, how does it feel to save a Mars mission and revolutionize space navigation in the same afternoon? I thought about Marcus's phone call that morning, about his dismissal of my work as theoretical nonsense with no practical value. I thought about my parents watching the live stream, finally seeing what their daughter actually did for a living. I thought about all the family gatherings where I'd been treated as the cautionary tale about impractical education and poor life choices. It feels like vindication, I said. But more than that, it feels like proof that some things are worth working toward even when nobody else can see their value. Dr. Chen approached, tablet in hand, and an expression I'd never seen before. Alice, she said, I just received authorization for something unprecedented. The director wants to know if you'd be interested in leading a new division.
deep space navigation and propulsion systems, unlimited budget, top-level clearance, direct reporting to the administrator's office. I stared at her. A new division? Your own program, your own team, your own mission to push the boundaries of human space exploration as far as they'll go. For 15 years, I'd worked in the shadows, contributing to other people's missions, solving pieces of larger puzzles without recognition or acknowledgement. The idea of leading my own program, of having the resources to pursue the breakthrough technologies I'd only dreamed about, was almost overwhelming. There's just one condition, Dr. Chen added with a smile. The first project is designing navigation systems for the Mars Colony mission scheduled for 2035. Mars Colony. The theoretical future that Marcus had dismissed as science fiction was about to become my next assignment. I accept, I said without hesitation. As the celebration continued around me, I pulled out my phone and found Marcus's number. This time, when I called him, it would be to share news that would redefine everything he thought he knew about his little sister's useless degree. The call connected after 2 rings. Marcus's voice came through clear and professional, the way it sounded when he answered his phone between surgeries. Alice, I saw the news coverage. That was incredible. For the first time in decades, I heard something in my brother's voice I'd never heard before. Genuine awe. Not the condescending concern or dismissive skepticism that had characterized our relationship for years, but actual respect. Marcus, I said, standing in the quiet corridor outside Mission Control where the celebration was still ongoing, do you remember what you told me this morning about theoretical work that leads nowhere? A long pause. Alice, No, let me finish. You said I was living in a fantasy, working on science fiction projects while ignoring the real world. You questioned whether my work had any value beyond making me feel important. I could hear him breathing on the other end, probably sitting in his office at Seattle Presbyterian, surrounded by medical journals and patient files, trying to process what he'd just witnessed.
What you saw today, I continued, was 15 years of theoretical research solving a problem that conventional science couldn't handle. A Mars rover that was going to fail its mission is now back on track because of algorithms I developed in graduate school. Equations that you dismissed as impractical just saved a $100 million space mission. I know, he said quietly. I watched the whole thing. The precision, the efficiency, the way your system outperformed everything NASA had been using. I had no idea. You had no idea because you didn't want to know. It was easier to assume I was wasting my life than to consider that you might not understand what I was accomplishing. Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, less certain. Alice, I need to tell you something. When I accessed those files, when I wrote that letter to Senator Williams, I genuinely thought I was helping you. I thought if your program got shut down, you'd be forced to find work that was more practical, more understandable. More like yours, you mean? Yes, he admitted. I thought if you had to explain your work in job interviews, if you had to justify your skills in terms that normal people could understand, you'd realize that all that theoretical knowledge could be applied to something more tangible. I walked to the window overlooking the courtyard, where clusters of NASA employees were still discussing the demonstration. Some were pointing at their phones, probably sharing videos of the successful course correction with colleagues who hadn't been present. Marcus, do you understand what you almost destroyed? What you tried to eliminate because it didn't fit your definition of valuable work? I'm beginning to, he said. The news coverage is calling it a breakthrough that could revolutionize space exploration. They're saying your navigation system could be the foundation for Mars colonization, for missions to other star systems. It could be, but it almost wasn't, because you decided that work you couldn't understand wasn't worth doing. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of misunderstanding and judgment finally coming into focus. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally. I'm so sorry, Alice. I was wrong about everything. Your work, your choices, your life.
I let my own definition of success blind me to what you were actually achieving. It was the apology I'd wanted for years, but hearing it now felt different than I'd expected. Not triumphant, but sad. Sad for all the time we'd lost, all the conversations we could have had if he'd been willing to see past his assumptions. "There's something else you should know," I said. "NASA just offered me my own division, Deep Space Navigation and Propulsion Systems. My first project is designing navigation technology for the Mars colony mission in 2035. I heard Marcus exhale sharply. A colony mission? Permanent human settlement on Mars? The theoretical science fiction you mocked this morning is going to be my next assignment, with unlimited funding and direct authority from the NASA administrator. Jesus, Alice, I don't know what to say. You could start by understanding that some achievements can't be measured by the standards you're used to. Some work matters precisely because it pushes beyond what's currently practical or immediately profitable. I get that now, I really do. But Alice, can I ask you something? What? Are you happy? With this life, I mean. With the choices you've made, the path you've taken. Are you actually happy? It was a question I'd asked myself countless times, especially during family gatherings when I watched my siblings navigate conversations about their conventional successes. But today, standing in the aftermath of the most public validation of my career, the answer came clearly. Marcus, 3 hours ago, I guided a spacecraft across 47 million miles of space with precision that would have been impossible 5 years ago. Tomorrow, I start planning navigation systems that will take humans to another planet permanently. Next year, my work might be keeping colonists alive on Mars. I paused, watching through the window as Dr. Chen emerged from mission control, phone pressed to her ear, probably fielding calls from administrators who wanted to understand how quickly they could implement Artemis technology across other missions. "Am I happy?" I continued. "I'm doing work that will echo through centuries. I'm solving problems that affect the future of human civilization. I'm pushing the boundaries of what's possible in ways that most people can't even imagine. So yes, Marcus, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Even without the traditional things, marriage, kids, a house in the suburbs, those aren't the only ways to build a meaningful life. I chose to build something different, a legacy measured in light years rather than quarterly reports, in breakthrough discoveries rather than dinner party conversations." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I never thought about it that way." "I know, and that's the problem. You, Mom, Dad, Elena, you all assumed that because my life didn't look like yours, it must be less valuable. You measured my success by your standards and found it lacking, without ever considering that I might be succeeding by standards you couldn't see." "What happens now?" he asked. "Between us, I mean." I considered the question. Years of feeling dismissed and misunderstood couldn't be erased by a single conversation, even one as honest as this. But something had shifted today, not just in Marcus's understanding of my work, but in my own confidence about defending it. "Now, you know who I really am," I said. "Not the family disappointment with the useless degree, but Dr. Alice Walsh, Chief Engineer of Deep Space Navigation Systems, the person who just revolutionized space exploration on live television. And you'll never let us forget it," Marcus said, but there was something like affection in his voice. "I shouldn't have to remind you. That's the point." After we hung up, I stood in the corridor for a few more minutes, processing the conversation and the entire day. Through the windows, I could see news vans arriving in the parking lot, reporters preparing for interviews about the demonstration. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from colleagues, family members, and journalists. The quiet anonymity that had characterized my career for 15 years was officially over. From now on, when people asked what I did for work, the answer would make headlines rather than create awkward silences. Dr. Chen appeared at my elbow, tablet in hand, and expression mixing exhaustion with exhilaration. "Alice, there's one more thing. The President's science advisor wants a briefing next week about expanding Artemis technology to satellite defense systems. And the European Space Agency just called asking about collaboration on their Jupiter mission." I smiled, thinking about the conversation I just had with Marcus, about the years of being treated as the family member who couldn't quite figure out how to make her education practical. Schedule them both, I said. And Dr. Chen, make sure the briefing materials emphasize that this breakthrough was built on 15 years of theoretical research that most people considered impractical at the time. Absolutely. Any particular reason? Because the next time someone dismisses long-term research as wasteful spending, I want them to remember the day that theoretical astrophysics saved a Mars mission and opened the door to interplanetary colonization. As we walked back toward mission control, where interviews and planning sessions would probably continue late into the evening, I thought about my grandmother's words from the birthday celebration. Some of the most important work in the world happens in quiet corners, away from applause and recognition. She'd been right, but only partially. Sometimes that quiet work finds its moment in the spotlight, and when it does, it changes everything, not just for the people doing the work, but for everyone who assumed its value. Today was my moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new theoretical problems that would seem impractical to people who couldn't see beyond immediate applications. But I would never again apologize for pursuing work that pushed beyond the boundaries of what seemed possible. The stars had always been my destination. Now I had the resources, the recognition, and the authority to reach them. And Marcus would never again question whether my degree was useful. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.